report. Senator Waters.
Thanks for being here again today. I've got some questions mostly about mining projects, and hopefully we've got the right folk here. I want to kick off with the Adani Carmichael mine that my colleague's already been asking about, but I've got some slightly different questions to ask. I'm interested in the revelations that came to light last night. I'm not sure if you saw the ABC 7:30 program, but the head of Adani Australia was also in very senior management at the time of an enormous river pollution incident in Zambia.
Order. I think it's important that people are accurate.
Yes, you can.
The report did not say that at all. The report said that this particular individual came into that organisation.
Is this a point of order, Senator Canavan, or are you making a comment?
Senator
Canavan, are you making a point of order, or are you making a comment?
Things are accurate.
Senator Waters.
Thanks, Senator Canavan. I'll attend to my accuracy. As I said, the report revealed that the fellow was a senior executive at the time of a pollution incident, and that the chap is now the head of Australian Adani. Obviously, there's lots of Adanis in the Adani group, but he's the head of the relevant holder of the approval for the Carmichael mine as approved by the Minister. So I'm interested in whether that information about that particular executive officer's environmental history was before the department and or the Minister at the time the Carmichael mine was approved.
Been here for 5 minutes.
No, it's an African thing, Senator Canavan. It's not an Indian thing.
Senator, the department has issued a statement on this issue, and it outlines the process that was undertaken to assess the environmental history of the Carmichael project. That statement notes that the project's approval was made in full accordance with national environmental law, that the department's consideration of the proponent's environmental history was the most comprehensive undertaken under the EPBC Act. And as part of that consideration, we not only sought relevant advice from Adani, but also the 3 parent companies for a period which covered 10 years. The scope of that request went well beyond what is required under the EPBC Act for the decision process, but reflects the robust approach that has been applied to this approval process. The department provided clear advice to the Minister that the requirements for protecting the Australian environment would be met through the 36 strict conditions imposed, and that these conditions would fully protect matters of national environmental significance. The department at this point obviously is focused on ensuring that these conditions are implemented, monitored, and enforced in a transparent manner. The department also noted that the additional information which was provided by an NGO, which was the subject of the report last night, about the environmental history of the company operating in another country, which employed a current employee of Adani, but that we are seeking clarification from Adani on that matter, and that was also included in the report last night.
Yeah, thanks, Mr. Knudsen. I do have a number of questions, and I've got the statement of reasons in front of me to which you're referring, so that's good. So I'm just, as I said, seeking to clarify, was the information about this Zambian incident before the department or the Minister when the Carmichael mine was approved?
No.
Okay, and did you ask Adani for this information?
What we asked was for the environmental history of the executive officers in both Adani Mining Limited, but also its 3 parent companies, covering 10 years.
So why was this information not provided then?
That's what we're seeking clarification from Adani.
Okay. So do you have a copy of you said you've now sought clarification. Do you have a copy of that letter that you could table that outlines the parameters of your request?
I don't have that with me, Senator.
Okay, well, could you please provide that to us at your earliest convenience? Can I ask about...
Senator, can I just ask, do you need to get the permission of the company to table the letter?
I think we need to take it on advice.
Yeah, I think we have to just check that.
All right, thank you. I am interested in any correspondence from the company as well, which clearly you would need to check for their permission with.
There was a press release that was issued by Adani about KCM, I think overnight. Have you seen that one?
Yeah, I have. Thank you. Thank you,
And it
Minister.
says that he was not personally responsible or alleged to have been personally responsible for environmental breaches in Zambia or elsewhere. Not defending the particular individual, but I think for the sake of fairness, we should note that the company has identified his role as having been to take responsibility for managing legacy issues and implementing world standard improvement and capital projects.
Thanks, Minister. Hence my questions about what the department is now asking the company. Okay, so have you had a response yet to that request for clarification?
We have had a response from Adani indicating that they require 2 weeks to get back to us on that.
Okay,
request.
so when does that 2-week time frame finish?
2 weeks from today, Senator.
You received the letter today?
No, the request was for indicating that they would be back to us in 2 weeks from today. So,
Okay, so sorry, when did you get the letter?
we got their reply, I believe that was yesterday or the day before. 2 days ago, Senator.
Can I just
On the Wednesday.
Sorry. So you made in your request that they get back to you in 2 weeks?
Sorry,
No,
no,
they
just to
asked
be
Because
very
that's where I was
clear.
getting
And
confused.
the
Okay.
company asked for
To
2
be
more
very
weeks
clear,
to reply.
we had requested that they respond as soon as possible and ideally by Friday, so i.e. today. The company has come back and asked for an additional 2 weeks beyond the original suggested date.
Thanks, Mr Newton. So you mentioned in your first response that you thought this was the most comprehensive request for information about environmental history of the proponent. That doesn't really square with me when there's been these new revelations that you weren't aware of at the time of the approval. So how was this information not in the department's knowledge to brief the minister on?
Point of order.
Yes, Senator Robinson?
I've got a copy of the statement here. They have quite clearly indicated what the work being conducted by this particular person was, and it doesn't accord with the allegations that you are making. And the bottom line is that this is the most comprehensive undertaking in relation to environmental history ever taken. So if you just want to actually get on with the matter and stop defaming people, read the statement.
Then you might have a clear
Senator
understanding
Waters,
of what this
that's not
debate's
actually a
about.
point of order, but thank you, Senator Ronaldson. Senator Waters.
Thanks, Chair. Yes, I am seeking to obtain some information from the officials, so I appreciate you allowing me to continue on with that. So just again, we're about the process here of how the department informs itself in order to then brief the minister to make decisions. So I'm still seeking to understand why it is that the department, despite, as you say, having a apparently comprehensive approach, didn't have this information in front of us.
So, Senator, the fact that we asked for the history of the four companies in the chain of command of Adani covering a 10-year history was why that is the most comprehensive request that we've ever done in environmental history. In terms of why this information was not included in that assessment, that's up to the that's why we've specifically asked Adani to come back and clarify that question.
Okay, so am I correct in that it is the obligation on the proponent to supply this information, and the department effectively just waits for companies to dob themselves in? You don't do any own investigation.
Well, Senator, consistent with the information that we seek on environmental impacts, where it's on the onus is on the proponent to tell us what the environmental impacts are. Yes, we request information, we receive that information, we review it.
So could that be why you didn't know about this scandal? Because you require companies to dob themselves in rather than actually investigating the history of the department's own volition?
Senator, the fundamental basis of the environmental assessment process, which is the same in every country in the world, it is a self-assessment process. That doesn't mean, however, that we don't do our own assessment in behind that. So I've talked several times about the fact that on issues where there's a high level of uncertainty, etc., we will do analysis of our own. In the case of environmental history, the compliance and enforcement area will always do well, always is perhaps a large word, but will do on a risk-based approach an analysis of the environmental history of a corporation in Australia in particular. And obviously with the limited environmental history that Adani has in Australia, that won't be as robust in terms of the analysis that we would have in our regular data systems. But that being said, an analysis was done of the environmental history to inform the briefing of the minister. This did not come up in that, though. Yes, sir.
Okay, hence my point. If you require companies to dob themselves in, they're probably going to leave stuff out.
There's a general presumption at law that
That's right.
people are, it's uniform throughout almost everything we do in society, Senator, that people act according to the law, and that's the presumption here. Companies come forward with their assessment, their environmental assessment and their reporting, and there's a general presumption that people act in accord with the law.
Well, let's go to that, and particularly given that you've referenced that in the statement of reasons. So my understanding is there's been some allegations made in relation to the Adani's environmental history in its home country, and in particular that there has been quite extensive investigation, which you do reference in the statement of reasons, about the conduct of the company in relation to their Mund report. So that's what I want to now ask about. You mentioned in your statement of reasons that there was some commonality between the boards of the offending companies in India and the Australian branches of Adani. Can you just tell me some more information about the commonality there?
Yes, Senator. Our understanding is that some of the directors of Mund Reports SEZ Limited, otherwise known as Adani Ports, and the directors of the parent body of Adani, which is Adani Enterprises, there was some commonality in some of the directors, including Mr. Adani, I think was one of them. So that was where that commonality was between the companies that are in the direct line of it, between Adani Mining and their parent companies and this other company, Adani Ports.
Okay, so that meant that you were able to consider that information as it pertained to the suitability of Adani to be given licence to build the Southern Hemisphere's largest coal mine to ship out through the World Heritage Great Barrier Reef.
That's correct, Senator.
So in the statement of reasons, you somehow come to the conclusion that the proponent is a suitable person, despite the fact that there was a 2010 investigation of Adani Mundra's operations by the Indian Ministry of Environment, which found evidence of large-scale destruction of mangroves near the port, and that there was, subsequent to that investigation, the ministry issued a notice saying that it was of the opinion that Adani Mundra had violated certain environmental regulations and not complied with the conditions of its environmental approval, and required the company to show cause as to why its approval shouldn't be cancelled. There was then a further investigation in 2013 by an independent committee which had been set up by that ministry to investigate complaints about the environmental impacts of the operations, and that committee found, quote, incontrovertible evidence of violations of environmental clearance conditions and non-compliance. And yet in the statement of reasons you seem to place very little weight on that, and you say that the allegations are in the process of being investigated. No positive finding has yet been made, although you do note that a show cause notice has been issued. I don't understand how that adds up. How do you then reach the conclusion that this company is a suitable person for the purposes of conducting a very large operation?
Senator, I think you need to look at the whole entirety of the considerations around this matter. Firstly, the issue around prior environmental history is it's not a black and white in that it's one of the matters that the Minister may take into account, but it is our standard practice that the Minister does take that into account. But it also isn't, how would you put it, say a punitive clause. So it doesn't indicate that if you find anything of any nature that may be connected, that therefore that then renders that company as being unsuitable to be granted an approval under the EPBC Act. So the matters that need to be taken into account here are a whole range of matters. And what we're looking at here in relation to Adani Ports is where you have some connection between the directors of the parent company of the parent company of the parent company of Adani Mining. So what happened here was that a whole range of factors were weighed and taken into account, and one of the primary considerations being our consideration of our ability for them to meet their requirements in Australia under Australian law. And when all those factors were taken into account and weighed, the Minister took a determination that he thought that they were a suitable person to be granted an approval.
But what was the countervailing evidence to establish that they could and would uphold conditions when there was a litany of demonstrable evidence that they were not complying with conditions?
Not for Adani mining, Senator.
That's the whole point of the environmental history provision, that you look to the chain of corporate command and you look at the history of executive officers. I don't understand how the Minister could come to the conclusion that the statement of reasons say he came to.
Senator, Ms Callister just gave you an articulation of the way in which this works across the whole statement of reasons, including the way in which the Act works, the way in which we've applied it in its history, and the way in which we took into account all the matters before advising the Minister. And the statement of reasons reflects the advice that we gave to the Minister and on which he made his decision.
And that the conditions that are set out in the Minister's approval meet the requirements to protect matters of national environmental significance, that the conditions will meet that.
Well, A, I don't accept that, but B, that's assuming they're going to be complied with, which is the very point that I question.
But there's...
Senator Waters, this is starting to sound a bit like a debating point rather than question and answer.
I'll move on, thank you. So given that those 3 investigations in India were weighed and somehow found not to be enough to judge the proponent unsuitable, which again bemuses me and concerns me greatly.
It's a comment again.
It's Senator Waters, if you could focus, given the time.
Thank you. Just given that context, what about Zambia? Given that their legal system is nowhere near as robust as ours, and given the allegations last night, what would your approach be to weighing the allegations under that legal system when judging suitability?
So, Senator, I think I have to come back to the fact that we have sought clarification from Adani, and it'd be premature for us to comment at this point without having received, as is appropriate, a response from Adani to our request.
Okay.
Clarify something. I mean, you might not be able to answer this, Mr. Knudsen, giving you seeking clarification, but I'm trying to establish myself, but it doesn't seem this company in Zambia, the KMC, it's not actually it's not connected to Adani directly.
No, it's the
okay. So let's get that clarification. I just Google this Jayakumar Janakaraj. I hope I get that right. On his LinkedIn accounts, it says he was CEO of that company for 4 years, indeed, starting in October 2008, which is after this environmental incident. Just for the records, he's hardly hiding under a bushel. You say you didn't? Did you view his LinkedIn account at all, or is that something you'd do?
Senator, the original material provided by Adani noted his role with that company at that time.
Right.
Sorry, can you say that again?
The material provided by Adani in the environmental history noted his role as CEO of that company at that time.
What date was that provided?
We'll have to take that on notice, Senator. I'm not sure.
Because I thought we established earlier.
This is the original environmental history assessment done to inform the decision that was just made. That's correct, Senator.
Okay, because I was asking you about that earlier, and I thought you said this knowledge was not before you.
What I said, Senator, was that there was no information provided on this incident. So the information provided by Adani did note that the individual was in that role with that company at that time. What it didn't note was any environmental history of note with respect to his time while he served there.
Disclosed excuse me, Senator Canavan. So they disclosed the links to the company, and that wasn't enough. I mean, what sort of checks do you do? I thought you said you checked the environmental history of executive officers.
Senator, I think as Ms. Callister has laid out, there was a number of elements that went into our assessment of the environmental history of the proponent, which included seeking that advice from the company, which included the fact that he had served in that role. However, it did not include any information on an environmental incident. So that's what we're seeking clarification on at this point.
Okay, so we come back to the fact that you don't do any investigations until the company puts up a red flag and adopts
Senator,
something.
that isn't what I said earlier on.
Well, I genuinely don't understand. No, excuse me, I have the call. You guys have had a good go. It's my turn now. I don't understand how you were told that there was a link between the executive officer of the company seeking approval from your department and a different company, why you then didn't check to see whether there was any relevant incidents.
Same reason they didn't check about the preservation advice as Senator Waters.
Well, your government has sacked a quarter of their staff, which is probably not such a good idea in terms of their capacity.
Senator Canavan and Senator Waters, if you could just come back to the point, I think your particular point, if you could clarify exactly what you're asking, because I've heard several answers now to the same question.
Yeah,
so
me too.
If there's anything that you haven't heard, I think it's been asked and answered several times. So if, for the sake of time, if you can clarify exactly what information you haven't got yet so that we can move on.
So just, thank you, once and for all. So you didn't check the environmental history of the executive officer, despite the company saying this person has links to this other company which has been convicted and fined in another country.
Not at the time of the incident.
Senator,
that's right, Senator Ronaldson. He wasn't actually with the...
Sorry, Senators, the question has been asked, so if you could allow the officials to answer.
On innuendo.
Senator Canavan,
Pipe down, buddy, let them answer.
Senator Canavan, you don't have the call. A question has been asked, so please allow the officials to answer.
Senator, we sought and obtained considerable information in relation to the environmental history of Adani. That came from a range of sources, including non-government organisations. We then conducted an assessment of that information. We did not conduct an investigation of that information. And I think that's an important distinction because it's an assessment process, not an investigation process.
Okay, and would you now describe what you're currently undertaking as an investigation or an assessment?
Senator, it's a request for information back from the company. It's neither, in effect.
Okay. All right, will you or have you advised the Minister to take this new information into account in the decision that he's due to make on the Abbott Point coal port expansion, which of course is being built in part for the Adani group of companies?
Speculation dependent upon what information we receive from Adani. However, to the extent that it is relevant, it will be included.
Okay, so you will put that that new information
to the extent that it is
relevant. Okay, will you be advising the Minister in relation to his legal powers to reconsider the Adani mine approval on the basis of this new information?
Again, Senator, that's a question of speculation.
I was going to say, Senator
Sorry,
Waters,
I
think
can't hear
that's,
the officer
hypothetical.
actually.
Sorry,
Hypothetical. For heaven's
Senator Back, if you've got a point of order, let me know. But
I do have a point of order. The question is hypothetical.
All right, I'll rephrase. Have you advised the Minister of his ability to reconsider the approval for Adani's mine on the basis of this new information?
Well, point of order.
hang on,
part of you.
Yes or no is all I'm...
sorry, point
It's
of
not
order.
hypothetical. It's what have they done? Have they
Point
told
of
the
order.
Minister he can
Point of order,
overturn the
Senator
approval or
Ronaldson?
not?
Sorry, Chair, that would be policy advice to the Minister and not appropriate to be answered by these
About the
officers.
Minister's legal powers, is anybody telling him that he could reconsider the approval on the basis of this new information, or is it just me doing that now?
Senator,
Senator, that does actually sound like you're now asking for policy advice that would be given to the government. Are you able to rephrase the question? So if you've still got information you're outstanding, if you could rephrase it as a question that's not policy, either hypothetical or a policy advice.
I'll try, thank you. I wasn't actually going to the content of the advice, but who would be responsible for advising the Minister of his legal powers to reconsider an approval in light of new information? Would that be the department or...?
The department, Senator.
Okay, so I look forward to that occurring, hopefully.
Senator, the problem we've got, just to slightly add to what the officers have said, is that we don't have the new information yet. So we are still speculating about something that...
Thank you.
Well, actually,
I will
Senator
move on to a related point.
Okay, thank you. Just we'll move on, but can I just clarify just the... So new information's come to light yesterday and you've gone back to seek further information on the new information.
Yeah.
And once that they've said it'll take 2 weeks. So once that new information comes in, the department will assess that new information and provide advice to the government accordingly.
That's the process, yep.
Thank you. Senator Waters.
Yeah, thank you. And I have a related question in relation to that. Does that accord with the timeframes for the decision on the Adani coal port expansion application?
Senator, there is no Adani coal port.
Well, the North Queensland bulk ports Abbott Point
Hang on,
expansion.
Senator Waters, let the official please.
It's
finish
actually
answer.
the Queensland Department.
Oh, that's
of State
right. The Queensland
Development
government's doing it now, even though they promised they wouldn't
Senator
in the
Waters,
election
you've
campaign.
asked the question. Please allow the official to answer the question.
The Queensland Department of State Development is the proponent, so that would be the person who the approval or would be given to if the project is approved.
Yeah, and what's the
so the current timeline for that decision is the 21st of December.
Okay, so you'll have time to get the response from the company and feed it into that process. 21st of December, did you say?
Again, Senator, to the extent that it's relevant. As Ms. Pallister just pointed out, it's a different proponent than is the proponent for the Adani mine.
Okay, so that's a very interesting point. Does that mean that the law would not oblige you to then advise the minister about who will use the port? Because clearly, as you say, it's the Queensland government that's now wanting to dredge and expand this coal port.
Sorry, Senator
but the
Waters,
port would be used by
Senator
companies.
Waters, that sounds like another hypothetical question at this point in time.
It's
You're
actually a
asking
process
to
point.
hypothesise about something that hasn't actually occurred yet, I think.
No, it's a process point about environmental history and whether it is in fact relevant or not, that something that's being built for a different entity, but the application has been made by the Queensland government, would you legally consider it relevant for the environmental history of the person that will use the facilities to be considered?
Senator, that's a matter that we'd be seeking legal guidance from our General Counsel branch in preparing the information for the Minister for his consideration on the project.
Thank you. I'll watch for that with
Sorry,
great
just to clarify
interest.
that, so you will do that once you've got the information back. So you
They'll
do
work
that
out
at
whether
that point
it's
once you've got
relevant.
the information back to find out what was relevant and what wasn't and what course of action was required after that?
That's correct, Chair.
Thank you. Senator
Okay,
Waters.
thank you. Let's move on to Shenhua, because there was a bit of a difference of approach in the statement of reasons to the project we were just speaking about, the Carmichael Mine and Shenhua, again in relation to environmental history. In Adani, the statement of reasons clearly show that you did consider overseas environmental history, but somehow concluded that they were nevertheless a suitable person. But excuse me.
Senator Ronaldson, if you have a point of order,
Well,
please go through the chair,
Please
Senator
just
Ronaldson.
let me ask the question.
I do have a point of order. All these questions are laden with commentary. Can Senator Waters, who is quite capable of asking good questions, please just ask the questions without
Senator Ronaldson,
the
that's
commentary?
not actually a point of order, but I will take the point that we only have another 20 minutes, Senator Waters, so if I could just remind you, if you can keep your questions concise,
Thank you.
that would be helpful.
Thank you. So there was a difference of approach taken in the statement of reasons for Adani, where you state that you did consider the overseas environmental history but concluded that the applicant was nevertheless suitable. But in the Shenhua statement of reasons, it doesn't include any discussion of that company's environmental history offshore at all. And so I'm not sure whether the minister considered it. It's not in the statement of reasons as being considered. So why is the difference? Why consider it in one instance and not in another?
So, Senator, the statement of reasons doesn't go to that point. It does talk about what we did find in our assessment of the environmental history of the proponent, and Dr. Banks can outline what we found in that assessment, which is included in the statement of reasons.
Yeah, look, I have read that, so thank you for the offer, but given the shortness of time, I'm more interested in why the approach was different in the two instances.
Again, every assessment is done individually. We take a look at a range of factors when we're conducting our assessments, and I don't have at hand the specific rationale that the assessment would have used for determining what was appropriate in this case. So that's something I would have to come back to you on notice on.
All right, well, look, thank you for doing so, because I'm interested in whether anyone raised the environmental history of that Shenhua group. For example, there's evidence of groundwater damage in Inner Mongolia by either that company or companies within that group of companies. And so I'm interested in whether that was considered. The statement of reasons would infer that it wasn't. So if you can take on notice whether it was, and what information was before you, and why did you consider Adani's environmental history overseas, but not Shenhua's environmental history overseas is the key I'm trying to get at. So thank you for taking that on notice. While we're on Shenhua, where's the water management plan up to? Has that been sent to ISC yet?
Simon Banks, Assistant Secretary, Assessments and Fuels Branch. I understand that we haven't received the water management plans at this time.
Okay, not yet. Is there a time frame on that?
Not that I'm aware of. I mean, that's in the hands of the company to provide those management plans when they're ready.
Okay.
For our consideration.
Thank you.
Senator, I could probably add a little bit more to that one. Shane Gaddis, Assistant Secretary, Compliance and Enforcement Branch. The last discussions that we've had with the company was they were expecting to commence mid-2016. So in order to get those plans assessed and approved before that, we would expect that they would probably need to be submitting those pretty soon or towards the end of the year.
Okay, thank you. I'll watch for that. And lastly, before my colleague asks some questions, I'm interested in the new Ackland Stage 3 expansion in Queensland. In February, I'm just after an update, in February the decision date was extended until the 30th of April, but since then there's not been an update of the status of the project unless I've missed it. So I'm just interested in what stage of the process that mine is now at.
Hi, Senator. We have stopped the clock. One of the matters that the Minister did after the recent Queensland state election is he wrote to the Queensland Government asking for advice on whether there were any projects where there were matters underway that may be relevant for his decision on projects that were currently under assessment.
Mm-hmm.
And one of the advice that he received back in relation to that was that the Queensland State Government was going to be undertaking a review of the new Ackland coal mine Stage 3 expansion.
Mm-hmm.
So at the moment our assessment process is paused while we wait for the outcomes of that review.
Mm-hmm.
And we're still waiting for advice from Queensland on the finalisation of that review. The Queensland Coordinator General has concluded his assessment of the project because the project's being assessed under the assessment bilateral. So once we get further advice from Queensland about that review, we will then be recommencing and finalising the assessment process.
Okay, so the review that they're undertaking is separate from their actual approval process?
Yeah, the
Does
Queensland...
seem a bit odd.
Yeah, that's a matter really for Queensland, but the Queensland Coordinator General has concluded his assessment, and I understand that there's also been a draft environmental authority issued for the project, and that has been objected to, so that matter is now before the Queensland Land Court.
Thank you. I do have some other questions, but I'll pop them on notice. Thank you.